Luck on Sunday, proudly sponsored by Al Basti Equiworld Dubai.
Good morning. I hope you're enjoying a cracking weekend. Reflecting on yesterday's action, I'd be very surprised if you weren't. We've got a wonderful show for you lined up. 2.5 hours with the best guests here on Luck on Sunday. Here's what's coming up. So first up this week, a man who's enjoying his best ever start to a season. Indeed, yesterday, he passed his best ever total for a season. Jamie Snowden is my first guest. And he will be helping me reflect on a fantastic afternoon's jumping yesterday. Surname lowered the colours of Altior. So much to talk about out of the Christie Chase at Ascot, and just as much to talk about at Haydock, where Lost in Translation stole the Betfair Chase from Bristol de May. Lost in Translation confirming himself as one of the most exciting young chasers in the country, and a roll-on a clash between him and Surname in the King George at Christmas, which you'll see live on Racing TV. So we need to talk to plenty of people this morning. Paul Nicholls will be joining us on the line. So will the Master of Seven Barrows, Nicky Henderson. How is Altior this morning? And what are the future for him now? And it's been a good weekend for Harry Fry as well, with If the Cap Fits winning yesterday at Ascot. A rather older, more venerable stable star, you know what I mean, Harry. He's off to Newbury to take on Paisley Park, and we hear from the trainer all about those plans. Welcome back. We will also be showing you the Japan Cup, and I don't mind giving the game away because it's all over social media anyway. Oisin Murphy was the winner of the Japan Cup, riding Suave Richard for Yasushi Shono, and we're going to show you that in about 25 minutes' time, so don't miss it. What a wonderful triumph for him, and what a great year he's had. And I'll be joined later in the programme, just after 10 o'clock, 10:15, by Pete Ramsden, who's a partner at Rossdale's veterinary practice in Newmarket and has been a real pioneer in veterinary medicine, and also an outspoken force on horse welfare, and sometimes quite critical of regulatory authorities around the world. He'll be a most interesting guest a little bit later in the programme. And Emmett Kennedy from the Final Furlong podcast will also be along to talk about yesterday's racing, I should say, after 9:30. But my first guest this week is a man who has enjoyed successful spells as an assistant to the two great titans of modern national hunt training, Nicky Henderson and Paul Nicholls, and he's put that experience to extremely good use. After a short commission in the Army, where he rode several winners in the military races at Sandown, indeed he broke records in those races, including a victory for Her Majesty the Queen, he turned his hand to training, and slowly but surely he's built up a really powerful stable. And now in Lambourn, yesterday, he passed his best ever total for a season. 36 winners, and we're not even at the end of November. Promise of more riches to come for Jamie Snowden. Jamie, good morning.
Morning, Nick. How are you?
And welcome to Luck on Sunday. And I've sort of been feeling the urge and the itch to get you in that chair now for a good few weeks. So well has this season started. Has it surprised you, or do you feel it's just the result of gradual building to an inevitable position?
Like all these things, you can't ever assume you're going to start off quite as well as we have, and we're slightly pinching ourselves at how it has begun, really. But certainly over the last few years, we've really tried to recruit better horses in the team, and I think the last few months have really shown exactly what we've been trying to achieve.
And you're getting nicer horses as well. You've got a good collection of owners. Is it as simple as needing the money to spend on the better stock?
I don't think it is a matter of needing the money to spend on better stock, but like all these things, the more you spend on a horse, the luckier you become. You still need to be buying the right sort of horse, whether it be a store horse or off the flat or these Irish pointers. But listen, we're not in the market to be spending the fortunes that some people are on these Irish pointers, but we're lucky enough to have a few people that can go out and buy a potentially nice horse. And obviously the team that we built up over the last few years is sort of detriment to all that, really. It's all worked out brilliantly.
And so Chips Keswick has been a great supporter of yours, owned your festival winner, and owns the horse who was responsible for breaking your seasonal record yesterday, the Banner King Rebel. Well known from his exploits in the football arena. How is he enjoying racing? Oh,
he loves it. He absolutely loves it. I think obviously football and racing are his two biggest hobbies, and thankfully President View really got the ball rolling for us back in 2015, and things have gone from strength to strength since. And we haven't had another sort of Cheltenham winner quite in that league for him, but hopefully we've got a few lined up for him.
So take me back to where it all started. Was training an inevitability for you?
Obviously, I was riding in point to points, from the age of 16, and riding was always the be all and end all, really. University, army, which was all great fun, but actually, sort of riding was where it was sort of where my heart was, really. And listen, you can't carry on going on being an amateur jockey for the rest of your life, and I broke my leg really quite badly, and that sort of gave me the kick up the bum to work out where I was going. And training was the obvious answer. How
long were you in the army for?
4 years.
And did you enjoy it?
Loved it.
Tell me a little bit about the service you saw in the forces.
There wasn't a huge amount of active service, actually. I spent most of my time riding horses and playing elephant polo in Thailand, but that's another story. But no, I did 1 year at Sandhurst, which was obviously great fun, hard work. But there was a sort of crossroads, really, I suppose, was when I was on guard duty at Sandhurst. And it was the night before the Grand Military Gold Cup at Sandown, and there was the commandant at Sandhurst was in the Royal Irish Regiment, and they had leased a horse to run in the Grand Military the following day, and Lucy Horner, who was in the Royal Irish Regiment, was due to ride the horse, but she was stuck in Northern Ireland. There was a mortar attack, and she was stuck in Northern Ireland, couldn't get out, and there was a knock on the guardroom door, and somebody said, "Snowden, you're needed up in the commandant's office." I thought, what have I done wrong? I haven't polished my boots or whatever it might be. And I rushed up there, and he said, "You can ride a horse?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you're riding in the 320 at Sandown tomorrow." And the horse was 20-1, and it won. And from that moment onwards, the commandant basically said my get out of jail free card from Sandhurst, and off I went, sort of riding left, right, and centre. And then I joined a cavalry regiment, and my colonel basically said, "Can you go and win it for the regiment?" So I went off down to Paul Nichols's and spent a year down there, acting as his pupil assistant, living in the pub, and luckily won the race that year as well. And so things snowballed from there, and I was basically race riding the whole time.
It strikes me you are in the perfect position to assess the relative strengths and merits of the two great training titans of our time, because you had the year with Paul Nicholls, and then you spent a significant spell as an assistant to Nicky Henderson as well, while he had some brilliant horses. Was it a very different experience at each yard?
Yeah, very much so. I was obviously being employed by the army when I was working down at Paul Nichols's, which obviously had its advantages as well. But no, I loved my time down at Paul's. And it was because of Paul that I ended up getting the job at Nicky Henderson's. And I spent 4 years at Nicky's at Seven Barrows, and that was a great grounding. Very traditional way of training horses, and I think history shows how good he has been at producing trainers through his hands, really. And that was a great honour to be there with some good horses, and hopefully the results now are sort of really where it's all come from.
So why do you think he is as good as he is? Why can he sustain that level of achievement over 3 decades?
It's amazing how hungry he still is. He's still at the store sales, buying stores, looking to the future. I think both Paul and Nicky have got incredible work ethics, and they do not stop. It's certainly, they're two trainers that we all very much look up to and strive to, follow in their footsteps, really.
Do they have very different methods of, say, getting horses fit, feeding horses, entering horses?
I think ultimately they're both quite traditional, so they both come along sort of a similar path. They've both got hill gallops, and they train obviously to the facilities they have. But no, I suppose fundamentally they both train in a similar kind of way. But Paul's very good at delegating, and I think that's something that I learnt a great deal from him. And Nicky's got a wonderful eye for a horse and producing a horse for the big occasion.
So do you think one of Paul Nicholls' strengths is man management, essentially?
Very much so.
So allowing his staff to take a bit more responsibility?
And I think he would say that himself as well. I think he's very good at giving somebody the responsibility to go about and put in what he feels are he will guide you along the right direction, but he'll very much put you up on a stool and let you make your own mistakes, but hopefully guide you in the right direction. And he's excellent leader.
So have you essentially tried to do things like you saw Nicky Henderson and Paul Nicholls do it?
Very much so. I think I'd be silly not to. Having been to the two best trainers in the country, I'd be a fool to try and train in a different kind of way. So, as again, you train to the facilities that you have, but you try and follow the same sort of structures that both of those great trainers do.
See, what strikes me about you is that this has been a gradual process getting to where you are now. The house feels that it's very much built on solid foundations rather than you're not going to be a one-hit wonder. So 50 winners in a season and then bang, nothing much. Is that a fair way of how you see it?
I've always felt in this game that if you come in big, you probably go out big, and we're here for the long term, and it is you've got to build the right foundations of which to make the house, as it were, and I think we've definitely built those foundations. My head girl's been with us since we started, and secretary since we started moving to Lambourn, and travelling head girl. The structure is there for it all to build. And it's been obviously Paul and Nicky have been very instrumental in learning off those kind of structures.
And now you weren't always in Lambourn. Your first couple of years training were in Dorset, weren't they?
Yeah.
And I remember trying to get hold of you in those early days, and it being quite a challenge. I know it's a big talking point as we approach the general election, communication in remote parts of the UK, but you were really up against it those first couple of years. Yeah,
it was very much character building those first couple of years. But when you've worked for Paul and Nicky and you're having Cheltenham winners left, right, and centre, and you go out and you start training by yourself, and you have one horse and one member of staff, it's a bit of a shock and a bit of an eye opener. And those first couple of years were very tricky. But actually, you sort of make your own mistakes where nobody really sees. And then we moved up to Lambourn in 2011. And I think our first runner from there won the Summer National.
Yeah. Was that Knight and Coombe?
Knight and Coombe, yeah.
And he'd been a tremendous old horse who'd won in points and hunter chases, and you kept improving him. But he'd been a sort of friend to you right from the beginning, hadn't he?
Yeah, even I managed to ride a couple of winners on him, actually. So he must have been quite good.
Was it fun, the early part of it as well, though, in a sort of buccaneering, fact-finding way? Do you look back on it now fondly?
Oh, very much so. Those first couple of years, they were tough, obviously. But as I said, we've still got the same team that started from there, and we celebrated the winners wholeheartely, and the pub was part of the village, and it was great. It was hard work, not a lot of results really, but it certainly taught us a few lessons of how to progress from there, and thankfully it seems to be working.
Was it possible then really to think beyond the end of the next week?
No, and listen, yourself, setting up any business, you've got to think about today, and today looks after tomorrow, as it were, and it was hard, but you look at where we are now and where we've come from, and it's very rewarding. But obviously, you can't sit still, and you've got to keep driving forward. And
Lambourn was a big turning point.
Very much so. The facilities in Lambourn are brilliant. We were lucky enough to buy Folly House when the sort of property market wasn't thriving, and so we moved in there. Lambourn was in a little bit of a lull. Since then, I think the horse numbers have really gone up, and in the whole village, and the facilities have got better and better, and we're just lucky to be there.
Do you think the greater number of trainers who are doing well in Lambourn actually helps you all in terms of bringing ownership to the area, so you're more visible?
Very much so. I think I'm right in saying that before Present View won at the festival, Lambourn hadn't. Obviously, take Nicky out of it because he uses his own facilities. But I think Lambourn itself hadn't had a festival winner for I don't know, 10 years or something.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it?
Which was extraordinary. And then obviously Oliver Sherwood had many clouds going to win the national, and then obviously Warren's done really well. And I think the jumps community in Lambourn is really thriving now.
And is it an enjoyable place to exist and be a part of?
Oh, it's brilliant. Kids are at school together and with sort of other trainers, and it's a real community. And I think people do thrive off other people's success, and it works. And yeah, it's a lovely place to live.
Now, I mentioned that you'd ridden a winner for Her Majesty the Queen, First Love. That must have been a special moment at Sandown.
Very much so. Nicky was kind enough to let me have a go on the Queen's horse, and he went and won. I think he won three races on the bounce of that, and it was a huge honour to put those silks on. And
now, of course, you're training for the Duchess of Cornwall, and I think you're her most successful trainer to date by quite some way. Rafe Beckett might call in a minute, but you've done wonders with Pacify. It's not often that you get horses off the flat who've had a fair bit of hard knocking and they come out and do what he's done over hurdles.
In fairness to Rafe, Pacify came in great condition,
as you'd expect.
And for a flat horse, he was a very sound, good-moving individual who straight from day one loved his jumping, and so we thought we'd start him off at a fairly low level and work our way up slowly and steadily. And I think for some of those flat horses, getting his head in front did his confidence a power of good, and he thrives on his racing. He thrives on his galloping and his jumping, and he just loves it. So we've managed to get quite a few runs into him, and he obviously went and won those races through the late autumn, as it were, and late summer into the autumn. And that listed win at Kempton was wonderful, and it was just a shame that Cheltenham was such a bog the other day, and trying to give away £5 to a good horse of Emma Lavell's in a bog wasn't ideal. But he went down fighting, and he got beaten a couple of lengths. So hopefully we can reverse those placings on off level weights.
Do you think he's the sort of horse now that you'd want to just give a break to and bring back for the spring festivals?
Possibly, but as I said, he loves his galloping, he loves his jumping, he loves his racing, and I think he only lost 5 kilograms running at Cheltenham in the bog that day, and he's put it all straight back on within a week. He's got a great constitution, and I think I'm quite keen to keep ticking away with him, actually. Yeah.
And is there an obvious option for him coming up?
Well, as I said, we were beaten by we were carrying a £5 penalty here in this Grade 2, and the winner obviously relished the conditions, and carrying £5 less, it certainly helped him. If we're contemplating going to somewhere like the Tolworth, the Grade 1 at Sandown, where he wouldn't carry that £5 penalty, and that's in early Jan, so that could be the possibility to the route to go with him. And is the owner a nice, straightforward owner to deal with? Doesn't give you too much grief? No, she's wonderful. Yeah, she absolutely loves it. Obviously, Chips Keswick shares half with the Duchess of Cornwall, but no, Duchess of Cornwall bred him obviously as well, with Prince Charles, and no, she loves it. She came to Kempton when he won that listed race, and really enjoyed it. Do you quite like being the royal trainer of choice? Don't tell Nicky that. Oh, I don't know. You've got the bragging rights at the moment. As far as this season's concerned, you must keep thinking it's difficult to maintain that momentum, but do you have the winter horses still to come out? Do you still have the young horses to come out now to keep the numbers up? The most wonderful thing about where we are at the moment is that we've got more 3-year-olds than we've ever had before. So to be on 36 winners already and still have so many young horses coming through the ranks, it's wonderful, yeah. And we've got plenty of winter horses to go to war with as well. So no, we're in a really strong position. Tell me a bit about your partnership with Gavin Sheehan, because that seems to have worked extremely well. We've always known he's talented, but it seems that he's got the talent and the application
in the right place now.
Yeah, he's a very good rider, and obviously he came over from Ireland and went to Charlie Mann's, and then Warren Great Tricks and was champion conditional with Warren, and then obviously, like, you know, all these things in racing, so you have peaks and troughs, and things weren't going quite so well for him, and it just coincided with the time where we didn't really have a sort of stable jockey, as it were, and Brendan Powell rode our festival winner, but then things didn't quite work out there, and we were sort of using the best available, which is great. But obviously, when you have a nice horse running on a Saturday, if there's 3 meetings and you've got a nice horse running on a Saturday that isn't sort of Ascot or Aintree, then you're slightly stuck to find you know, a top jockey that might be there, and Gav was just going through a bit of a trough at the time, and I sent him a text and said, listen, you know, would you like to come around and have a cup of coffee and, you know, maybe sit on a few of our horses at some point and see where it might lead, and thankfully that coincided with you know, the form of our horses, you know, going up, you know, better horses and more winners, and Gav started riding quite a few of them, and it's the sort of partnership has developed and blossomed, and you know, he's a big part of the team.
What are his strengths?
He's very good tactically. He's very strong in the saddle. He's in schooling every Wednesday, and he's a team player. Obviously, we want to win every race that we run in, but we're sort of, we know that we can't, and certainly. I remember one of the first rides he had for us was on a horse called Kalahari Queen down at Chepstow, and we quite liked her, and she finished 6th in a novice hurdle, which you know, we were a bit disappointed about. And he came back and he said I like this horse. He said, don't worry about today, she'll be a nice horse. And you know, I was like, well, we quite liked her coming in today, but that was a bit disappointing. And every morning that he came into the yard, he went up to Kalahari Queen and just straight ahead. And my head girl said, you know, I think he's onto something here. And obviously she came out, she was second in a Grade 2 later on that season, to Roxana, who ended up obviously going on to win at Cheltenham. And I think the point of that whole story is that, you know, it's not all about that day at Chepstow, it's about the future. And he can see that, and he won't beat up a horse today, you know, because tomorrow there's always tomorrow with that horse.
Which is invaluable for you as a trainer, because with all due respect to the top guys, they have one ride for you. They're not that fussed about whether they ride the horse the next time.
Well,
or it's not crucial.
It's not as crucial. Whereas, you know, so I think he's a team player, you know, and I think that's key.
And that's been a big part of your success, I'm guessing.
Very much so, yeah.
And if you wake up in the morning and have dreamt about something happening that's good in your career, what might it be?
Dreaming what might be good in our career. Listen, we're all after sort of more Cheltenham winners and festival winners and what have you. So we keep striving to achieve that.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk, and Bruce Millington, the former editor of the Racing Post, has raised it again in his column this week about whether Cheltenham is too much of a focal point. He thinks it's not. What's your view as a trainer? Well,
obviously, having been at Paul's and Nicky's, you know, they very much think, you know, Cheltenham is the festival was wonderful, you know, and it's something that National Hunt Racing does so brilliantly, and I love it. You know, even when I'm at the festival and haven't got a runner, you know, the hairs on the back of your neck go up. It's such a wonderful place. No, I think we're doing things as a sport very, very right in building it up to the festival, and it's where all of the eyes of the general public are on, and yeah, it's wonderful.
And if you're aiming a horse like Pacify at the Cheltenham Festival and he's already had 6 runs under his belt by this stage of the season, then everyone's a winner.
Well, exactly.
I guess you can't do that with every horse, though. That's the thing, isn't it?
No, some horses take the racing more than others, and it's just so happens that Pacify's got such a strong constitution that he thrives on his racing. So there'll be other horses that need a bit of tender loving care that might only have a couple of runs before hopefully getting there. But it's, you know, Pacify is a strong horse, and he's great to have in the team.
Now, how keen are you into your flat racing?
I like my good flat racing. I can't say I'd be keen on Wolverhampton on a Friday night, but I love my good flat racing.
And you'd be keen on a runner in the Japan Cup for a prize of £2.1 million. That's where we're going now. For the moment, Jamie, thank you very much. Jamie Snowden is going to stay with us for the remainder of the show.